Hey everybody, today we're talking about the ABRSM Grade 1 snare drum solo, Mind the Gap. Now when I start a snare drum solo, the first thing I do is check out the time signature. All right, it's the first thing that they've written, so it must be important. All right, the time signature tells us how many beats per measure we're going to have and what kind of beats those are. And if you notice, we've got a 3/4, a 3/4. And we all know the top note tells us how many beats per measure we're going to play. And the bottom note tells us what kind of notes those will be. So if you think of it like a fraction, if you've gotten to fractions in math, 3/4 and a fourth is a quarter of something. So we have 3 quarter notes per measure, all right? The next thing I like to look at are any instructions the composer has given us here. And right above that first measure, Mr. Bradley has written "without fear." And I think that's really great. Any of those instructions that tell us sort of how we should be feeling when we play this, what we should be communicating when we play this, I think are really helpful, all right? And "without fear" says to me that we're going to play this quite boldly. We're going to go for it and not be afraid of anything, all right? We're going to be very brave. The next thing that we can look at is the title. Sometimes in the title they tell us things that help us understand how we're going to play or what the piece is trying to say. And in this case, Mr. Bradley writes, "Mind the Gap." Now that doesn't initially spark any feelings or emotions for me, but once I start reading the piece, I see that Mr. Bradley is probably indicating that we should mind the gaps in the music. And if you notice, in the first 4 measures, we have a rest on beat 3 of every measure. So I think that he's probably indicating that we should be very conscious of minding that gap, and we're going to subdivide in our head. First measure, 1 and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and 2 and 3 1 E and a 2 and 3 and really thinking about those rests. Now, the next thing I like to look at, Mr. Bradley also writes next to "without fear," writes a quarter note equals 92. That's really helpful because that indicates the tempo that the composer would like us to play. And if you just plug 92 into your metronome, it gives you this. This is 92 beats per minute, 92 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and, okay? That gets us really feeling the tempo that they want us to play. The next thing I go through are the dynamics. I think that's very important. Dynamics, if you don't know, are indicates how strong or how softly we play, and they're written underneath the part. As you can see in the first measure, there's a little F written there, and F stands for forte. Okay, forte is an Italian word for strong. It's not an Italian word for loud, all right? So let's make sure that we really think about it being strong and not loud. The next dynamic level you see is in measure 3, and that's a P. A P, which is short for piano, which is Italian for soft. It's not Italian for quiet, it's Italian for soft, okay? Again, measure 5, back to forte, surprise, back to forte. And then in measure 8, what we have is what we would call a subito, and subito is Italian for suddenly, a subito piano in measure 8. You're going to play a flam at the beginning of that measure, and we'll talk about flams if you don't know. Flam at forte, and then immediately piano. So we're going to really drop the stick and then leave it down here, and we're going to play our pianos very close to the head. Okay? Measure 9 is piano, measure 8 is piano, and then, measure 9, measure 10, then measure 11, we've got a crescendo. See those 2 lines growing to the F? We have a crescendo, which means we're going to gradually get louder, okay? And, gradually get stronger, I should say. We're going to gradually get stronger, and we're going to use the whole measure to get to that F. Sometimes we see a crescendo and we just get loud very quickly, and suddenly we're at forte way before we need to. Other times we stay very quiet and then realize at the end, oh, there's a crescendo, so we suddenly just get really loud on the last 2 beats. But we're gonna take special care to make sure each note is a little bit louder than the one before. Okay, each one just a little bit louder. Now, what happens in measure 13, 14, and 15 I think is fantastic. This is what we would call a terrace dynamic, okay? We have forte, and then immediately mezzo forte, and then immediately, or subito, Italian for suddenly, subito piano, okay? Forte, mezzo forte, piano. And this is great because we talk about the percussion, on the percussion, or we talk about dynamics being very terraced, very specific levels. So for me, a really great thing to do is to practice a measure of eighth notes, and we start at forte. 1, 2, 3, 4, mezzo forte, 3, 4, mezzo piano, 2, 3, 4, and piano, 2, 3, 4, and pianissimo, 2, 3, 4, okay? Always really challenge yourself, push yourself to that pianissimo, and really setting levels. So I think these are 3 great measures that we're gonna work on. 16, we've got a crescendo back to forte, and then finally we're subito, suddenly, piano to forte at the end. All right, this is a fantastic solo. We're gonna have a little play along now, and we're gonna do it a little bit slowly, and then we'll follow that up. I'll count you in, and you can play at the performance tempo with me. Okay, now we're ready for our play along. I'm gonna say one thing before we begin that I say before all the tuned percussion play-alongs and the timpani percussion play-alongs. Let's focus on placement. Let's focus on keeping our sticks playing in about the same area. Now, if you've seen the intro to snare drum video, you know that we want to play with our snares running across from us. We want to play above them, and we want to play about here, okay? Not right in the middle, not out at the edge. Sometimes I see a lot of people playing lots of different places. It gets us different sounds that we don't need. And I know a lot of people like to sneak out to play quiet and come into the middle to play loud. Right now, I think it's most important that we keep our sound consistent and we make our dynamic changes just by our stick height. Okay, here we are. This is quarter note equals 76. I'm going to count aloud. And I encourage you to count aloud too, because we want to really solidify that time. We want to mind that gap of beat 3. Let's give this a go here. 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and play. 1 and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and piano. 2, 3 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and big. 2, 3, strong. 2, 3, 1 E and 2 and 3 and flam, subito piano, 1 and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and growing 3 and strong, 2, 3, 1 and a 2 and 3 and mezzo forte, piano, growing 2 and 3 and strong, and 3 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and 2 and 3 and 1. Fantastic. There will be one more play along after this. I'll count you in and you can play at the performance tempo, which is 92, quarter note equals 92. And as always, I hope you're having fun. If you have any questions about this, please send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And enjoy the play along. Talk to you later. See ya. 1, 2, 3, play.